I'm calling the May 23rd, 2022 Planning Commission meeting to order. And we'll begin with a roll call. Start to my left.
George Velasquez.
Kristen Zumar.
Gail Seitz.
Matthew Buckley.
Here, Fania Louise.
All right, so we do have a quorum, just barely. I know that Bree is not able to attend tonight, and John Lafferty has resigned. I thought I would read the email that he sent to Mayor Caranta and me this morning. It is with regret that due to the constraints of my current work schedule, I must tender my resignation from the City of Newcastle Planning Commission. It has been a pleasure and a privilege to serve the city for the past 2.5 years. And I hope to return to service in some capacity when my work schedule permits. So John got a new job in New Jersey. He's working nights. Monday nights in particular are very, very busy for him. So at least at this time, he's hopeful that his schedule will change today. He's resigning. So the mayor will be looking for a new commission. Also, Chris Rogers, our city planner, is unable to attend tonight. Typically, he does make sure he attends any meeting with an application before us, but he's very, very familiar with the application and has been involved in the process up to this point and will be involved here out, but Chris is not able to attend tonight. Moving on to minutes. Everyone received a copy of the minutes. Are there any comments or corrections? Motion?
Make a motion.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Minutes have passed. We will talk about, this is different in my agenda. All right, we're going to talk about items 4 and 5 in the packet agenda together. And the review of the comprehensive plan goals and strategies for the annual report will move down to later on the agenda, which is how I received it, but it doesn't matter. So we're going to be talking about the discussion and recommendation regarding proposed rezoning of properties located at 130 and 150 Lucas Drive, Newcastle, from IOP Industrial Office Park to R3 Residential and GC General Commercial. We're also going to have a preliminary discussion of the concept plan for a 451 unit mixed use development project at 130 and 150 Lucas Drive. So we're not going to vote on anything tonight, and we're not going to make any recommendations. Start off with that, and I'll try to give everyone a brief status of where I think we are in the process. In your packet, all of the commissioners received a concept plan, and we received both drawings and illustrative pictures, which give you a nice idea of what the project could look like. There, I asked Kim to send out ordinance 230-46 to all of the commissioners. Now, this ordinance was passed by council in March, and Planning Commission spent a lot of time on this particular ordinance. And we will be referring to it quite a bit as we go through this process. So I thought that it would be helpful for it to be included in your packet. So in particular, it's site plan review and approval. Section I is submission of a concept plan, and number 1 says the purpose of a concept plan is for the planning commission to informally review the development proposal prior to the substantial commitment of time and expense on the part of the applicant in preparing a site plan. The concept plan shall contain the information contained in attachment 2. And then we have the nice chart now, which attachment 2 shows all of the things that planning commission is expecting to see in a concept plan. And then alongside of that, when it comes to site plan stuff, it's laid out all of the things that planning commission is expecting to see. And then number 3, for developments that require a pre-application review per chapter 92 of title 29 of the Delaware Code, the applicant shall submit a concept plan to the planning commission prior to the pre-application review. And we're going to talk about that here in a minute. So we're requiring applicants to submit the concept plan because they will be going to the state on Wednesday, I think.
Correct.
All right, on May 10th, council had a first reading of ordinance 536 to rezone 130 and 150 Lincoln's Drive from industrial office park to R3, residential 3, and GC, general commercial. And our city code allows amendments to zoning code to be initiated by petition of the property owner. So that's what happened. And that's why there was a first reading on May 10th at the council meeting. The representatives of the applicant gave a high-level presentation, which I have a feeling we'll see tonight. And then a referral was made to the planning commission. And then there was a discussion that occurred with the legal representatives of the properties and some city officials. I know that Chris Rogers, Dan Lasco, Bill Barthel, and I'm not really sure who else from the city were involved in that concerning the process, including change required to the comp plan, in particular, map 3, the suggester of future land use, as part of the process, and as a land use change. And the agreement that came out of that meeting is that the applicant would proceed forward with the ordinance introduction related to the pending rezoning petition on May 10th, and that did happen with a referral to the planning commission. And that the applicant would proceed to plus the state planning preliminary land use service on May 25th. So as far as I know, they're on the agenda for Wednesday. And the nice thing about going to plus is that all of the state agencies are in attendance and they give comments, feedback. So DelDOT for transportation related, DENREC for environmental, flooding related, state planning, of course, is there, historical preservation, and I'm probably missing some, but
Fire marshal.
fire marshal.
She got them all. You got all the good ones.
All right. And we requested that before we really proceed looking at this in depth, we would like to get the comments back from the state. So they are attending. It says that there's 20 days until plus gives feedback, which puts us right before our next planning commission meeting, but we'll see. I don't know if that's hard and fast. So that's happening. And then also, the applicant has waived any applicable city review deadlines and or report deadlines to provide sufficient time for city officials to fully review the application and all that's involved. And then finally, Chris Rogers, our city planner, provided a letter to all of us. And I'm not going to read the whole thing, but since he's not here, I'll just relay or read a few of his comments. First section, 23061 of the city's zoning ordinance, planning commission is charged with making a recommendation to city council on zoning requests. Number 4, the subject parcels are designated as light industrial office park on map 3, suggested land use in the 2020 comprehensive plan. Number 6, page 39 of the city's 2020 comprehensive plan states map 3 suggested land use. While it is difficult to predict future opportunities and land development trends, this map serves as the basis for all change of land use and zoning applications. The planning commission and city council may entertain applications to change the suggested land use map and the zoning map on a case-by-case basis. The application would require a comprehensive plan map amendment submittal to the Office of State Planning Coordination. Number 7, the applicant has acknowledged the city's need to review the comprehensive plan for potential revisions to accommodate the proposed rezoning, and the applicant has waived the time limitation. Number 8, the rezoning request and concept plan are scheduled for review by Preliminary Land Use Service Plus on May 25th, 2022. And number 11, at 2 persons per dwelling unit, the proposed development would increase the city's 2020 population by approximately 16%. So recommendations are, number 1, AECOM recommends that the planning commission first consider the overall merits of amending the comp plan to permit a mixed-use development of this magnitude at this location prior to discussing the details of the concept plan. And then he puts in parentheses, while the plus review will focus on the specific concept plan, comments from plus agencies may inform the broader comp plan amendment consideration. And number 2, in pursuit of the previous recommendation, planning commission may wish to utilize the May 23, 2022 meeting, as an introduction to the project and have a general discussion regarding the comp plan issues. Given the complexity of the issues and the magnitude of the proposed project comp plan amendment, it may be useful to hold a separate workshop to discuss the matter in more detail. All right, so that's the status. Any questions on sort of where we are? So tonight, we're going to get an introduction. We have received copies of the comp plan. They're not comp plan, concept plan. But haven't had a formal introduction. And we have a chance to formulate and ask questions, have a general discussion of the requested land use change and the proposed project. So it looks like we have some presenters in the audience. So would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you, Chair. My name is Sean Tucker, for the record. I'm a land use attorney here in Delaware, or as my wife likes to call me, a dirt lawyer. And I want to thank you all very much for carving out time tonight to have us on your agenda. Here with me is Chef Shapiro. Seth Shapiro. So here's our, it didn't matter what I said, he was going to correct me. He is our land planner, who's here, who's largely responsible for the concept plan you have this evening. He's gonna share his vision with you and as part of our presentation. Also with us tonight is Eileen from Tom Diascanis and Associates, CDA Engineering. She is the civil engineer and is responsible also for concept plans in front of you, including the submission, official submission made of the concept plan. Mario Gangini is here from the owner Parkway and Gravel, as is Nicholas Ferreira. Hopefully we'll have just a couple of speakers, but we won't overwhelm you with too much tonight, certainly, unless you want to be. We want to give you certainly a firm overview of the project and the concept. It is my understanding prior to my involvement, just a quick opening, that my client did reach out when you were struggling through your comp plan update and did try to get in with this proposal before you wrapped up your comp plan, but was a little bit at the tail end and you've already done most of the work. And so they were encouraged, as I've been told, to come back later and revisit this. So here we are. We can come back a little bit later and got through COVID and have a plan we'd like to share with you. One of the things that I would respectfully submit to all of you that is unique about this application, and is a very good thing, is that you are seeing the rezoning proposal at the same time you're seeing the plan. And there's only one other jurisdiction I know of in Delaware that does that, and that's Newcastle County. And they changed that practice in 1997 because the professional planners in Newcastle County back at that time were seeing a lot of folks that would come in and show one plan conceptually as a rezoning, but then develop a different plan. Slightly different, some cases maybe material different in other cases. And so they amended their code to really bring it into that process or practice. And I think they did so very successfully for the past 20 years. And it really ties the two together legally. We are essentially proposing the same thing by using a covenant as part of this application, whereby anything that may get approved as part of this process, along with the zoning, we would be tied to. And so what you would see is what we would have to build. And, we're combining those two things, and part of our discussion with the city solicitor and the town manager was how procedurally we could do that and why that was a benefit, we thought, to the town and generally welcomed by all the professional planners I've ever spoken with. So we wanted to bring that predictability to this process as you consider our application. As council or as a chairwoman cites, give really detailed explanation for where we are procedurally, which you're spot on. This is exactly what we're doing. We have the rezoning, we have the concept plan, we're bringing them through together, and we're following the legal procedure to do that. Might as well just jump in and start with our first exhibit. It sounds like you've seen or had some exposure to it already. Let's bring this up. The only difference might be the color of Newcastle County in this one versus the one you have in front of you. I think it's green. The shading is green in the other one, and this one it's gray. So this is as big as I think it's going to get in PDF version right now.
Press the green button. Green button at some point. We got it.
There we go, a little bit, not much. So what you're seeing here, just in summary, is the municipal boundary with Newcastle County, which is backed out in this gray color. So this parcel that we're here about today, which is about 179 acres, is this large parcel right here. It's really the last significant parcel remaining in this business park, which is on Lukens Drive. And Collins Park, just by reference, is here in the back area. There is residential right next door to this, albeit in Newcastle County. And overlaid on this 179 acres is the concept plan that we're here to share with you this evening. We're going to drill down into that, of course. Obviously, this is the river in this area. You see stormwater management features along here. We have a range of residential unit types, again, that we'll drill down into in a little bit here in the next slide. I'm going to let Seth take over and talk about in more detail. But what our client was looking at here was really two options in the current marketplace. One would be possibly a logistics center, and with proximity to 295, which is just over here, That certainly is a viable option in today's market. But another option, which is what we're here to share with you and talk to you about, is this mixed use option where you'd have a range of residential housing types from apartments to single family. You'd also have a modest amount of commercial to bring a mixed use component to this site. And you would have, most importantly, I think, are the views of the river, which there's not a lot of that left anyplace, quite frankly, in Newcastle County. Even along, 495, you have the Amtrak line that separates 495, the views and the benefits of living along the river from the residential that's in Claymont. So really, we think a unique opportunity to bring a residential project to an area with some fantastic views. At the same time, we have as most of you, or all of you probably know, we have the charter school directly next door, about 450 students. And we've met with them and talked to them, and they are supportive of this. I think probably considering some of the alternatives, this was certainly one of the more ideal ones for them. There's certainly the ability for walkability between the school and the subdivision as proposed. And also think about folks who currently work in this business park today. Where do they go to eat at lunch? Some of them certainly probably bring their lunch, but others probably drive out to Route 9 and they drive back in and they drive out. And while there's not a direct connection to the city, certainly by going out to Route 9, you can get to the city, but it's several miles before you would, at least a couple miles, I would think, between here and Delaware Avenue, for example, downtown city of Newcastle. So it's separate, but there is the ability to come to the town through Route 9. We were a little surprised that most folks, I shouldn't say most folks, a lot of the folks we talked to about this project last year didn't realize that this parcel was actually in Newcastle City. A lot of folks thought it was in Newcastle County, but it's right on the fringe. The mixed use, though, really provides shopping and more likely, eating opportunities, dining opportunities for the commercial we're going to talk about. Certainly for people who would live here, who could dine here, eat here, even work in the business park and live there. There's somebody who travels that business park every day. You have an opportunity to buy some really new, updated housing very close to where you work, and you can walk to work. Now, obviously, everybody's not going to do that, but the idea behind the mixed use projects is to provide that opportunity and encourage that opportunity. The proximity again to 295 really opens this up, I think, to a wide marketplace, but also with a range of affordability. While we want to do luxury apartments, for example, there's going to be single bedroom, there'll be double bedroom, so there'd be a price range, from single family to apartments, 1 bedroom, 2 bedrooms, towns, and twins. So just a quick overview of the property. So make sure I hit all the points. There is certainly a traffic study that will be required by DELDOT. We've hired McMahon and Associates to perform that. Nicole Klein is our traffic engineer. She certainly will be coming to future meetings to talk a little bit about traffic. She's just getting started. We literally are at the apron, at the very beginning of the land use process and the traffic analysis. Certainly Bill Brockenbrough always attends the PLUS meetings, and we'll have a chance to talk to him on Wednesday and DELDOT's initial reaction. Nicole will be involved in that as well. We certainly will provide more information to you as we do our traffic analysis pursuant to DELDOT's rules and regulations. Chairwoman, you already mentioned the PLUS hearing that's coming up on Wednesday. So we covered that. And so with that real quick sort of 50,000-foot view of the site, let me drill down a little bit more. And I'm going to turn things over to Seth to talk more about his plan, the breakout of the different unit types, the commercial, the parking thought that went into this, and some of the exceptions that we would be seeking from the city regarding the parking, given its mixed use nature. And with that said, I'd like to use.
Anybody mind if I stand up? I'm a pacer. So thank you, Sean. So this is drilling into that plan area here. How big did you say the site was?
I think I said 179 acres total.
So, this is obviously a relatively compact development for a much larger site. And of course, a lot of that site is in the river and is wetlands, but this is all high ground and it's out of the floodplain. So And as Sean also mentioned, this is that last site on the waterfront, and it would seem, and when I first got there, it's got this incredible view of the bridge, right, and the water. I mean, it would be a shame just to put a big old warehouse on here at the end of it. So, so we basically organized everything with these sort of view sheds towards the river. And what you have here are 5 different housing types, which is rare for a single community. We have single-family homes along the edge here. We have twin homes here. The orange are townhomes here and here. And then the red, there's actually 2 types of stacked flat apartments. These guys here, and here are all walk-up garden-style apartments. I'm sure you're familiar with those. But these 2 buildings here are elevator-served apartments with retail at the ground floor on the northern reaches. We also have a central clubhouse. That clubhouse is for the residents of this community. It's a private for the residents of this community, but we're also going to actually put a publicly accessible restaurant in there. But that's a sort of a separate use from the clubhouse, even though it's attached to the same building. It's a waterfront restaurant that anybody can go to. So in total, we have 12,000 feet of retail, which includes this little piece here, this little piece here, and then there's another 3,000 or 4,000, I think is what we said for the restaurant, in the building here. And then the rest of the clubhouse is 9,000 square feet. And in total, there's 451 units in here. So I'm going to show you some just rendering views of this. Then I'm going to come back to this plan because there are a couple of things I want to talk to you that is unique to this plan. That's a little bit different than even the code changes we're seeking based on sort of 21st century best practices for multifamily. So let's go back to this. So here's a view sort of if we were hovering over that central sort of entrance, that main entrance point. There's an occupiable median here. It's not just a traffic median. It's actually a space that people can hang out in. And here you see that retail ground floor that ends about there and right about there in this building. And these are the largest buildings. They're 3 stories. With lots of balcony spaces, and in fact, we might have some bi-level units on the top, which could be really, really sort of premium. And heading down here, you can actually see the clubhouse here sort of set off to the side. We're still actually designing that building. It may actually get even a little bit bigger, and it may slide over to the right a little bit. But the idea is that it sort of completes this space along with the river itself. Let's go to the next one. So this is sort of closer to the ground, looking at that same building off to the left here. You can see the bridge is referenced. We did geolocate that. That is actually where the bridge appears if you were modeling it. And then the clubhouse here. And then the last view was just turned around with the river behind us, looking back towards that warehouse and Lucan's Drive with the clubhouse here. So this is sort of the central area. Let's go back to the plan. So as Sean mentioned, even with the switch in zoning to general commercial and R3 with the planned unit sort of overlay associated with that, there is going to be some relief that's needed for this, mostly because of kind of the same reason why this site itself is zoned industrial, right? The zoning code, that the comp plan, there's a relationship, is assuming sort of the separation of uses. Have you all heard of Euclidean zoning? The idea of, what that means? Anybody? Nobody? You don't count. I know you. So Euclidean zoning, brief side. Euclidean zoning is zoning that is by use. Started in 1926. That's when the Supreme, actually it started before that, but that's when the Supreme Court of the United States said zoning, yes, a local municipality can zone land use, can regulate land use. And Euclidean zoning is about the city of Euclid, Ohio, not anything geometric, but it is about the separation of uses. And Euclidean zoning has ruled the day for the entire 20th century, and has really started to it's now become a little bit more in question because we're not an industrialized society anymore. It was very necessary to separate industrial uses from residential uses and retail uses. And with the advent of the automobile, we got sprawl, right? Everything's far away. That's how you get traffic. Well, this is an example of saying, you know what, maybe that doesn't make so much sense anymore. There's no heavy industrial here. There's no reason why you can't live here and enjoy the riverfront. And as Sean mentioned, having that idea that, hey, someone could live here, work here, send their kids to school here, hey, wouldn't that be great? And that's something that Euclidean zoning, we all know, makes actually difficult. So that's one thing. The second thing is that the parking regulations in the ordinance are very automobile oriented. For example, you say that we have to have, the zoning code says that we have to have 2 parking spaces for every unit. That's excessive. That's really excessive for apartment residential. In fact, the Institute of Traffic Engineers has this little book, and you can look up, hey, where is this located? How does it work? And they recommend that the actual utilization is about 1.3, 1.4 parking spaces per unit. Now, we've actually gone and counted what multifamily residential actually requires. And you do that by sending an intern out there at 4 o'clock in the morning on a Wednesday, because that's when everybody's home, right? And you count the spaces in the parking lot. And guess what? Utilization is about 1.4 spaces per unit. So when we designed this, we actually designed the multifamily residential for 1.5 spaces per unit, just to be on the safe side, to allow for some guest parking and some overflow. And because there's a mix of uses, we actually think that number may be a little high. The second place where we're going to need relief is, for some reason in the ordinance, I'm not sure why, the clubhouse actually requires its own parking. But the clubhouse is actually for people who live within a 2-minute walk of the clubhouse. I'm not sure why we would use 40 parking spaces or whatever it requires. Do you remember what it was? It's a big number.
Yeah.
So once you take it to the 1.5 and you lose the 40 for the clubhouse, also the code requires parking for open space, which is actually the first time I've seen that. We provide this open space and this open space here, we actually have to require parking for it. So once you take those out, once you go to 1.5 and you take those out, we actually have more parking that would be required. But right now, per the code, we are actually under by almost 20%. So that's one place we're going to need some relief. I don't think that they're
22%,
22%.
almost 20. And don't forget to mention the Gateway District, similar.
right. And in fact, in the Gateway District, if we applied the Gateway District standards to this, we'd be perfectly fine. In the Gateway District, I think is probably the newest district in the ordinance and probably the most 21st century. So, that's just, it's always strange to come in and ask for a zoning change and then have to come back and ask for additional relief after that. But we wanted to be upfront and clear about that. So that's essentially how the plan works. It's really set up about views and having copious open space, right? Everything's sort of organized around the central sort of formal open space here, but we also have these 2 flexible recreation areas over here. While this is sort of a formal open space, this is more recreation. We have another sort of little formal parklet over here. The single family area over here. This is actually a relatively large area. It's well over half an acre. And then, of course, we have sort of this trail along the river and possibly even sort of a dock coming out. We have some regulatory issues with that. But here we have that clubhouse, and actually you can see we have a parking area next to that, but that's actually for the restaurant next to the clubhouse. Most of these people, everybody lives within a very, very short walk of this. The other thing is that, our goal is to have the internal streets in here be private streets, which means nice thin cartways, parallel parking, 8-foot planting strips, street trees, sidewalks on both sides. So it's a very walkable, sort of almost traditional type of neighborhood. I'm not going to say it's going to mature to something like what historic Newcastle looks like. Well, this looks like historic Newcastle in 300 years. It's not going to be red brick and whatnot, but the streets and the blocks and the open spaces is very much conceived in that traditional manner. So with that, if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
I have a question. In your concept, you have 2 areas to enter and exit.
Actually, there's 3.
And where's the third
So
one?
there's one right here.
Okay.
That's a street. Here's sort of
Okay.
another street, and here's a third one. That's another sort of traffic principle, right? As many entrances and entrances. Anytime you can establish a grid with multiple ways in and out, that's traffic calming.
But there's only one way to get into Lucan's Drive and to exit Lucan's Drive.
That's correct.
One other point which I want to mention, just to have a very clear record, as part of those zoning changes, we would have to go, besides the Board of Adjustment, for variance on the parking that Seth had mentioned. And we would do a traffic analysis for that, the parking study. Certainly, we'll share that with you and the Board of Adjustment. But in addition, we would need a special exception for the general commercial district to have a mix of uses. It is permitted in the code, but only with a special exception from the Board of Adjustment. That would also be part of this application. You might be wondering, why didn't we go with Gateway? Because the Gateway is your newer district that really sort of fits this well. We just, because there's not a direct connection to the city, we just felt
It's
like
not
the
really
Gateway
a
title
gateway.
wasn't the right,
Right.
yeah, and the way it's written, we didn't really qualify. But what we're really doing is taking some tools that are in your toolbox already, in your zoning code, your R3, in your GC, and with the special exception that we can see from the Board of Adjustment and a variance, getting to the same place, just a different way. We thought about certainly approaching you with a possible zoning code change, but then we would be doing that ordinance, and that could take 6 months or longer. Then we'd be coming back with a concept plan, then, potentially the comp plan change, and suddenly our timeline went from probably less than a year to 2 or 3 years. And by then, who knows where the market's going to be? Is there going to be a market like there is today for this type of use? So we decided again to use some tools that were already in your zoning code toolbox to get there this way. Assuming folks, embrace it.
I just want to add, so there is actually another way in and out of Lucas Drive. It's for emergency access right now. It's just right near the Den Rec building, or it's gated, but your emergency personnel have access to it.
And that's,
But there's the gate that takes you up through Buttonwood, but that's usually, well, sometimes it's open, but sometimes
It's
it's
supposed to be
closed.
closed, but it is for emergency access.
Oh, is that it?
Yes, yes.
Oh, all right.
and just for the record, that's very.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so there is if there was flooding or something of that nature, that would be a concern, which is always possible. There's another way out in an emergency situation, just like there is for the rest of the folks in the business park.
Your folks actually use it now because you own some of the land. Newcastle City owns some of the land in there, and they have to maintain it, so they will come in through that gate too. And in and out of that gate. They have
Speaking of flooding, I have a question. It looks like the 100-year floodplain line goes right along the edge of the development.
Actually, I can trace it out for you. So it comes up here and then comes down.
It pops up a little bit in one spot,
Right. But everything's out and above it.
all the buildings.
All the buildings are outside it.
Are they ground level, the buildings close to the floodplain line?
I think the code requires that the finished floor elevation of any residential use needs to be 1.5 feet, 18 inches above the 100-year floodplain.
We haven't really gotten high. I mean, work with CDA engineering, we really haven't gotten that far into the concept design. Or we're in the concept design phase, but we haven't really truly engineered out exactly how we're going to provide the grades through here. But our intent is to maintain these new structures outside of the 100-year flood.
And Mario can jump in here, and I'll add to that. We know what flood elevation is here. It's a known number, so we can design to be above that.
It actually fluctuates through our parcels between elevation 8, 9, and 10. And we did our due diligence and surveyed the lands, so we know where that line is. And what we show on our plan is actually where the line is, not what. Sometimes you can just bring in that data from the GIS system, but we actually did our due diligence and surveyed in order to establish where the 100-year flood line will be.
I believe there was also, wasn't there a record tide just a few months ago? And I know Nicholas went out there and it was dry. So
Yeah, that was in
October?
October. I was going to say, yeah, October sounds right. Sometime in the fall.
Yeah, we flooded. I live in the floodplain. So I have some concerns around sea level rise and, I don't know what the projection for this, the longevity of these residents being there, but, from the projections, we're supposed to.
Yeah, it's something that we're concerned about too, and we're going to be looking into that I think there are some preliminary projections that in 30 years it might raise about 8 inches.
Yeah, if you look at, it's
NOAA?
it's a benchmark that I was using, Chairwoman. If you look at the NOAA website, it's available online. Feds have estimated East Coast generally about 8 inches, maybe a little bit more, but I've asked, and my client has asked, our engineers to look at that very closely as part of our design and to minimize, that 30-year range estimate. Also, net fill, the design is still underway, but we're designing in a way that we're doing our very best to avoid any fill so that it's a net fill neutral. So it will not be raising the floodplain anyplace else, for example. Even though we're so close to the river, it would be probably microscopic. We still are shooting for negative net fill, so no change in fill. So we are very sensitive to sea level rise issues. We've heard that from other folks who attended our initial meeting in front of council at the introduction, and we are seriously focused on that. And we'll continue to look at that carefully before we come to any final design or final site plan.
Delaware's supposed to be sinking too.
Yeah.
Um,
And we'll try to drill in more Delaware specific. The NOAA model, I think, was the East Coast projection that I looked at. But we are focused on that. Even though your mortgage might be paid off in 30 years, you want people still have a place to live there for 30 years.
All right, and I had one other concern. On the other side of this property is Croda.
Yes,
And,
to the north, yes.
Kind of way up here.
right.
Yeah.
And I mean, we know that Delaware Memorial Bridge was closed down, and there, I just don't want to put residents in risk.
Sure.
by-
No, it's certainly a legitimate concern, and I have done a little research on Croda. I was with Newcastle County for a period of time early in my career, and we would look at those types of issues in concert with Denrick. I'll tell you what my current research has confirmed, and I do, with full disclosure, do legal work for Croda from time to time, just to be completely transparent. But what I'm going to share with you is exactly what I found in working with them in my research. Otherwise, for example, I took a look at any lawsuits that have ever been filed against Croda in Delaware. There's been no successful action for anybody who's ever been harmed. There was a claim filed, I think, after that release that grew concern and shut down the bridge. It was dismissed by the District Court of Delaware. I just took a look at that because I thought that might come up. They may be appealing that up to a higher court, maybe the Third Circuit, but I couldn't find any documented case that's been brought by anybody where Croda had actually injured somebody here in Delaware. I didn't do a national search. I will tell you from working with them, they're a very responsible company. They are very sensitive, obviously, to community concerns. They routinely meet with folks in the area about neighborhood concerns over the property. The Delaware Bridge was shut down out of precaution. There wasn't, just out of an absolute abundance of caution. There was apparently a gasket failure that caused that leak, and that's been addressed throughout the entire system, because obviously they never want that to ever happen again. So the good news is I have not been able to locate, and I don't, it's like I said, there could be an appeal filed someday and some court could find otherwise, but I could not locate any evidence for anybody who's been injured from that release or any prior releases. And I do know they have a routine outreach to the community around them. There obviously is a lot of residential in the area. There's Collins Park, for example, that's directly behind us. We have the school next door. And, unfortunately, Delaware's history does reveal a lot of heavy industrial along the river. And we have locations by the refinery that are residential. And I can remember when I was in grade school, the one explosion that occurred on Route 9 at one of the chemical plants. And I don't think it was the refinery, but it was one close by. So we do unfortunately have a little bit of history of heavy industry in Delaware and problems, but Denrick, I think, has been a good shepherd of this site. I know that they are routinely monitoring the air quality, and that's something that Croda has to answer for and follow up with routinely. So there are monitoring, place and they are highly regulated. And, you know, folks coming to look at this location off of 295, they're gonna know they're buying next to Croda. You can't miss Croda when you come in. So it's not one of those things where somebody could, you know, buy there and go, I didn't know, you know what I mean? So, you know, it's each their own. You know, some folks would be concerned about that. Some folks, not so much, but we understand the concern.
And I can add to that a little bit, and Mary can. There are monitoring wells on our site, on our property, and so far nothing has popped up. Now, we're not drinking the water out of the ground anyway, but it's at least an indication that groundwater wise, we're not being impacted by it.
Other questions from commissioners?
Yeah, one question. I don't know if this applies to the design, but as far as the city services, how does that work with, you know, I mean, getting, you know, leasing fire ambulance, or not ambulance, but the fire in and out of there, you know, and trash recycling. So just help me
Sure.
understand that.
And we, as you might imagine, we've talked internally about that. Because the community will almost certainly be privately owned by my client, with the exception of maybe the single family lots, that we're still looking at this. These would probably be sold fee simple, but the rest would probably be kept in the name of our client or a related entity. Maintenance on site would all be taken care of. So that would not fall on the city as a burden to maintain the property. We've talked about possibly using a private trash service, and we're still talking about that. We do think there would be certainly some call, you know, like on any community, somebody who may be trespassing. You know, there should be certainly be some police, you know, calls out to the site. Certainly there would be a property tax benefit. We're estimating that somewhere between $900,000 and $1 million annually. We're rolling into those numbers. We want to look at them, you know, more closely before we roll them out officially. But we're in the $900,000 to $1 million range based on our math. We have somebody else looking at that and double checking that number. So in no case do we see a net negative here in terms of burden on city services. Then you add in electric, you know, and so those numbers look sound.
And what?
And water, and what about
MSC water.
MSC water?
So where's the county?
Sewer's the county there, okay.
Yes. And also to add to that, we police already have a presence in
Castle City.
the Castle City. Phone call for that once in a while.
So they're patrolling the area, but certainly there will be some more. It's inevitable.
Right.
You'll have some additional service calls in the community.
One of the goals in our comprehensive plan is to address climate change. Are there any type of items in the building process or how that would be, allow us to you know, address that and use that as a accomplishment?
The photos, there's gonna be quite a bit of landscape. That's probably the best thing we can do from a climate change standpoint. Is exactly that. Landscaping that's not there right now. Right now, it's a wide open field that we did it today. Unfortunately, Sean's already alluded to it. So a lot of parking, we don't want that. Candidly, what we want is we want a landscape that's like, it's isolated from the industrial aspect of the facility. But just that landscaping in itself is going to be a huge climate change positive.
Would you do anything along the river area for erosion?
I'm gonna right now, I'm gonna say probably not, only because the permitting process for that is off the walls crazy. So probably would stay away from that for right now.
It would be considered fill, but it's certainly something we can look at.
Yeah.
I mean, you can do that with landscaping by planting grasses and things like that.
In the
Outside
uplands,
of-
yes.
yes.
In the uplands, yes. But not in the, we can't do it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you understand.
And we can look at also, we haven't talked about it internally, but we could also look at different building standards. Because, you know, there's different levels of building standards that meet certain criteria in terms of energy efficiency. SEER rating on each of these units?
Well, we kind of already have,
Okay.
again, Mary, okay, and Jimmy, because Seth can speak to this better than I can, but the buildings are designed to not be, we've been encouraged to go higher with the buildings, candidly. Well, if we go higher with the buildings, now we're looking at steel. And we're sticking with wood because it's a renewable source as opposed to a steel source. So this is one of the things we've talked about, how we can do renewable resources. The good news, you can find trees, steel is a little bit environmentally sensitive. Go ahead.
Yeah, the other thing I always like to say is that, you could build a warehouse building to a LEED, platinum standard, but it's still a building that requires everybody to drive to it, trucks to drive to it. Mixed use to me is probably the greatest thing you can possibly do. Because it actually gets people out of their cars, makes people walk places, which is incredibly.
What are our bikes?
Or bikes, right, actually very bicycle friendly. The other thing I will say is that, LEED, I'm gonna get on a soapbox here. LEED in very many ways is a victim of its own success, right? It keeps moving the standards up, and the building code keeps catching up to the point where the 2021 IBC building code, building to that standard was like 15 years ago, building to a LEED silver standard. So LEED's almost becoming like unachievable, because to get to a LEED platinum, you pretty much have to generate your own energy on site, which is really hard to do. So, these will be all built to the highest building code standards that there are, just by necessity at this point. But the wood thing's a good point. I always forget that, building out of wood actually is really better with wood versus all the carbon that goes into concrete and steel.
And I guess as far as impervious surfaces, you could have a big warehouse industrial.
Big warehouse, and people always forget, it's not just the building, it's a massive truck base that go around that thing. I mean, they are incredible. I mean, right, quite part of it. They're just needed safety space.
One of the things you might, oh, I'm sorry, one of the things you might imagine is in flux right now, and we've gotten this question from a few people about price ranges, folks want to know that, but materials are so expensive right now. We're hoping that's an anomaly, quite frankly, and that will settle out as we work with all of you over the next 6 months plus. But we have been reluctant to put out numbers just because of that snapshot we have right now, which is really unreasonable. It's hard to believe it's going to continue that way. As the supply chain strengthens, we're hoping those numbers will drop. I mean, plywood is almost doubled or tripled in price.
Yeah, as of last week, wood had come down. Concrete, however, gone up.
So cement definitely has
Yeah.
gone up significantly, absolutely.
So we're hoping that will stabilize also.
Anyone else? So I think we have a few members of the public, if there are comments or questions on what's been presented. Anyone? Dorothy?
Yeah, well, I have two. One is, I wonder, you mentioned actually, impermeable surfaces. Would you all be prepared to, for any parking, services and roads to use permeable surfaces?
Well, Andrew, we can certainly consider.
We can. Unfortunately, pervious paving
It's amazing.
is a maintenance nightmare. In fact, you pretty much have to count it as a pervious. You have to vacuum it out. And when you don't vacuum it out, it's now pervious, impervious, and you're not counting it as impervious and not taking that into account for stormwater, you're creating a really big problem.
So there's no pervious surface that isn't a problem like that.
No one has perfected it as of yet. We've been looking at it for about 10 years.
Because people still want, when it snows, they still want it,
Salted.
they want it salted, they want all those, things for safety reasons, and we certainly understand
When
that.
leaves fall off the trees, they deteriorate and get into the.
It's not impossible, and again, we're certainly willing to.
No, I hope you continue to look at it.
Yeah,
No,
no, it's a fair
I-
question. It's a fair question. One of the other things we should look at is the water ultimately alternative to the Delaware River anyway?
Yeah, I believe that is our intent. As you pointed out earlier, we have 3 stormwater management areas, and we took some preliminary calculations and their size to meet our stormwater runoff needs. And eventually, I think it's going to be overland discharge. We won't be, adding any clear end sections or anything like that, like no real point discharge. In order to provide the necessary retention in prior to, it entering into the Delaware River. It has to meet state code and regulations even for it to be approved. There's a reduction that's required, so the current runoff would have to be reduced with our development.
So there's a quality, we have to clean it.
Right.
But
You're
because we're
correct.
so close to the river, we get a
Because
little
it's tidal, I'm not sure that,
quantity.
we have a quantity, or, no, it's quality, yeah. Sorry, it's not really my, bailiwick.
We didn't know the project opinion, so I know it's quality.
So it's
Right,
quality.
so it's quality related, so we'll be treating it, holding the detention and everything in order for it to be clean before it even enters the
Well,
Delaware.
pervious pavement does help improve quality, which, like I said, it's something I don't, I like pervious pavement,
Like, if it's not maintained properly, it does become a maintenance nightmare. Not saying that they would not maintain it properly.
So it could be maintained properly. and then it would be
It's,
all right.
it's difficult for me, it's not easy to maintain properly.
I agree.
We'll certainly
Yeah,
look
I
at
have
it.
no problem.
I will, not to be a Debbie Downer, but I will also share that in this climate, the freezing and the falling
That's right.
also is problematic with it, whereas you go further south where it doesn't freeze, you don't have as many issues with it separating and failing, but we will certainly.
Ironically, I think it works better in the colder climates. Believe it or not,
Where it stays
I've
frozen?
seen articles where it's actually worked better. Because you don't get that, you don't get the, what I call the dumb article weather, where it goes from a rain to a snow and back to a sleet in 15 minutes.
And what about other surfaces like, I'm just throwing
That's
those out
great
like
idea.
Belgian block. I know it's very expensive, but there might be other surfaces like brick or something like that, that can be used. And of course, if it freezes and thaws again, you can always adjust it. And it's not a big problem.
You still have it's very similar to maintenance. It's basically a back truck that comes in and sucks all the particles, send them out, regardless whether it's the Belgian block or whether it's pervious. It's just long-term life.
Let me just suggest something we'll have to look at with you. If the water's ultimately ending up in Delaware and it's a treatment issue, my hunch is probably gonna be the ponds are gonna be a better way, more cost-effective way to treat, but it's just a hunch. And so we'll look at that and we'll circle back.
And I also have a concern about Buttonwood. I think Buttonwood, the residents really need, I don't know whether they've been paying attention. And that exit is something that could impact Buttonwood very heavily. And I hope that the city will, discuss it with them. And
I think I understand it's really just for evacuation or emergency purposes that it's used. It's not a regular.
isn't
in
it
and out.
unusual just to have one exit and entrance?
The way it's been, from what my understanding of that,
Residential.
that's true. The school.
I think they ought to be consulted.
Anyone else?
Brock Miller. Yeah, I've got many issues with traffic. I was at the last council meeting when I heard this presentation. The one-way in and one-way out deal bothers me quite a bit. I'm pretty familiar with this park. I'm back in there a couple days a week. The traffic isn't what I would call really bad back there. It's mainly dump trucks, delivery trucks. There are some tractor trailers, of course. They're not always the most courteous drivers. Some of them speed pretty well. I've had people that get annoyed with me going the speed limit, which I believe is 25. And I've had people zooming around me back there. As you get further back to where this development is, there's a lot of potholes. The road is not in really good shape at all. I don't know what's being proposed about that, but 450 units. I mean, maybe there's some people that don't have vehicles, but I mean, if you're doing 1.5 parking spots, I guess it's reasonable to assume we're probably talking somewhere between 400 and 600 vehicles, one way in and one way out, getting behind tractor trailers, all coming out to one spot. And I add to that some comments I made at the last council meeting, which were that by the police chief's own admission, 90% of the complaints that he receives are traffic related. I've only been here 5 or 6 years. I just thought it was always this way, but apparently it's always been kind of bad, but these last 5 years, it's gotten awful. People just cut through here. The traffic, there's always construction, always road work going on Route 9. I mean, somebody's gonna have to explain to me how this doesn't have the potential just to be a logistical nightmare where it comes to traffic. And where this is not gonna turn a pretty bad trip. Well, let's put it this way. The last few times Delta has come to have special meetings, like for the city council meetings concerning some different projects that they're working on. Those rooms were packed with residents giving them an earful. I mean, an earful. It got pretty tense at times about the speeding and, all the traffic through town. And I didn't realize, and I dare say a lot of people in the city did not even know that this was part of Newcastle City. I think it was a surprise even maybe to some of the council people. Okay, I don't know, I could be wrong about that. But that is all these other things you're talking about, I'm not real familiar with them. I mean, that's for smarter people than me to figure out. But all I know is 100% of my complaints since I've lived here, the police have been motor vehicle related. And I would just like to get some kind of a sense as to how's the city, okay, it's a pretty good amount of tax revenue. I'm sure that's gonna, make council people, take a long, hard look at this. But how many additional, when the chief admits we don't have enough police at the present time to handle the traffic. I mean, he just doesn't, and I feel for it, because I know he's frustrated by it. So there you have it. I'd like to hear what is going to be done to mitigate what I see is just a potential really bad situation with traffic.
So just briefly for the record, as we discussed earlier, McMahon Associates has been hired. They're a traffic engineer. Nicole Klein is one of the best I've worked with in terms of her ability to prepare a study and communicate it well with everybody, including me. There are specific standards, as probably most, if not all of you know, that DelDOT imposes upon all developers, all property owners, whether it's us or somebody else. There are level of service standards we have to meet. So there will be a thorough analysis. We're at the beginning of this process, so we'll share those studies. She'll come to a meeting. She'll explain how this project would affect level of service in the area. The proximity to 295, by the way, is superb. You want your higher density next to I-95 or major roads, not in the middle of Old Newcastle. So the geometry is excellent in terms of proximity to an interstate. Obviously, the functioning of that light right there on Route 9 is going to be important for her to study in particular. But we do have to meet level of service requirements or make improvements to the roads. The alternative, if you think about it, an Amazon's facility, you're probably talking about thousands of trucks a day. So it's just something to consider under its current zoning by right. We still have to do a traffic study, of course, but in the alternative, given what could go there, I would respectfully submit that mixed use is more appealing, and certainly I think more appealing for the school next door. So we'll weigh all these things very carefully and work with our neighbors and your constituents who are concerned about these issues, such as this gentleman, over the next 6 months or more.
All right, thank you.
And the Lucas Drive, you're right, there are potholes. That's on the DelDOT portion of the road. Just want to point that out. Once you cross the railroad track, because I know because we already fixed it, because I had the same concern you had. There was a lot of potholes, which fortunately were slowing people up. As soon as we fixed the potholes, it became a drag strip. I 100% agree with you on that.
All right, thank you, James.
Question about parking.
hoping somebody can sort of explain this to me. I'm not an expert, I'm trying to understand. So the development team was this idea of 1.5 parking spaces per unit, right? So does that include like, like parking kind of on the street in front of the unit, or is that sort of, so like, how does that compare to like where we live? Like, the Strand or Fifth Street or Fourth Street, so like, these are nice places to live, like we all live there, and I don't know that any of us feel like we're incredibly deprived by parking, like we sort of like our community with the parking that it has. So I'm just kind of curious, like how does the 1.5 units, 1.5 parking spaces per unit of this proposed development compare to the streets that we live on?
Probably higher, right? Probably, 1.5 per unit is probably higher than the center of Newcastle.
It's all on-street parking?
Oh, no.
Is it like underneath the building for the?
So, okay, let me back up. So actually, we love on-street parking one because it just makes better pedestrian-oriented streets, right? Because you have, the traffic aisle, then the drive aisle, a parallel space, a planting strip, and a sidewalk is a much more comfortable street to walk on. So all of these streets in here do have parking on the streets. Then we have sort of the internal lots inside some of the blocks on the inside, front doors facing streets. But then in some of these buildings, on the back side of those buildings, we do have individual garages on the ground floor. They would be for lease. And that's mostly it's actually kind of a little bit of a pet peeve of mine. Sometimes you see garden apartments that have ground floor apartments on all sides, but basically you live on a parking lot. So now you have ground floor apartments facing a sidewalk and the street, and then on the back side, you actually have a garage. So the first apartment's up on the second floor.
Your other,
On the other,
yeah, both of them.
you go to the next, I'll keep going. You don't see it
We can
here,
see the on-street parking.
but you see the on-street parking, right? What you don't see is that behind this building, there's a garage. And behind this building, there's a little.
So
garage.
there's
We don't rent it.
retail space in the front, garage in the back.
Well,
Is
actually,
that-
the retail space actually is the full depth of the garage of this building, but the retail space ends here,
Mhm.
and then behind that is.
And would you be petitioning DelDOT for some type of public transit to come through there, or better access to public transit?
If there's not already a bus coming back there, and I haven't checked that yet, it sounds like there's not, so your instincts are probably more up to date because you live closer to the area. But if not, we would certainly welcome that, and putting out a bus stop location, it would make a lot of sense to us.
Mhm.
Um,
Good.
Good call.
And also, just to give you some context, the cross hatching on the fronts of these apartments is where the mixed use
That's right.
is being proposed, that 12,000 square feet. See that little cross hatching? It's a little hard to see, but there's
Here
slight
forward.
cross hatching.
And here forward.
And then the restaurant clubhouse would be back here.
I guess my concern is because I take Route 9 to get to 295, to get to 95, so I don't want to go onto 13 to get onto it, so I would be really concerned about the traffic in the morning, and coming home again.
We'll study it carefully, and we'll also be able to say, does this add seconds of delay to get from Route 9 on to 295, and if so, how much? And Nicole will be able to actually mathematically say, in your peak hour, your AM or your PM, if you're traveling, this project will add X number of seconds of delay.
Well, I know what time I have to leave to miss all the school buses and everything. I have it timed out, so I get to work
You
at
get-
7:20 a.m. from my
720
house.
is the optimal.
Yes.
A very fair question.
James, did you get your question answered?
So the answer was that this is about the same, it just looks not as dense as where we live in Old Newcastle.
It's certainly look at that.
Is the R, I don't know what R3 is under zoning code. I mean, could you build the Strand under the R3 zoning code?
I think so.
2 spots per unit. probably have to, yeah, it might work. Might work if you avoid the cobblestones.
Yeah, the compact.
I mean, it's a little, I mean, like the Strand is, you know, I mean, Old Newcastle in general, the Strand is our street along the river. And then, you know, you've got these increasingly unaffordable, you know, like my son has a hard time imagining continuing to live in Newcastle because it's just not sort of affordable for most people, because it's such a great, amazing place. And that's sort of, you know, like I love the new housing here. And I applaud that, you know, we're trying to like back off on the parking. I'm just wondering, like, you know, are we challenging ourselves enough to build a place that is as beloved as Old Newcastle is, you know, 100, 200 years from now? Or are there government rules that are not allowing us to build what our great grandparents built, you know?
Well, that's for sure. There are certainly government rules that don't allow us to build county, you know, that replicate the city of Newcastle. There's a million things about the current codes that don't allow that. And we're already challenging them here.
Well, but if I
to get
may,
closer to that.
if I may, one of the things I think you're asking is, you know, do we need maybe as much parking as we're currently proposing? As a lawyer, I'm trying to minimize the size of the variance because that matters in Delaware. Size matters when it comes to variances. So a 22% variance doesn't concern me too much, but you start getting into 30 or 40% in terms of size of the variance, that can run us into legal challenges. But if there was support for less parking, and said we were to say, we actually don't need all this parking when you do your parking demands analysis, we would certainly consider less parking and more green space if the town was supportive and folks such as yourself were supportive.
Well, maybe there'd be a trigger where you are a little more, you know, backing off on the parking, less impermeable pavement, but I'm hearing a lot of concerns from the climate change. If you say, okay, well, there's some sort of issue that arises in the future, and then there's like a commitment to build additional parking, if and only if. Like it turns out there's a problem that shows up in the future.
We do that all the time. Where we put parking in reserve.
Yeah.
We still design our stormwater management system as if it was impervious, but we don't build parking
Unless the demand's there.
unless the demand is there.
I mean, in terms of making, again, in terms of, you know, less impermeable surface from a, you know, resilient, but also from an affordability point of view. Again, I'm thinking about, you know, the kids growing up, our own kids growing up in our own community, like, can they afford to like live in the same community that their parents live in? And the more we force developers to build parking that's not needed, the more expensive the, you know, apartments are.
No question.
We're happy to take a look at that, certainly.
Can I
What?
ask
Oh,
one
sure,
question?
sure.
How did you come up with the 2 people per unit number? Is that an
That's
average?
coming out of the code, I believe, out
Yeah,
of the
that's
R3.
correct. In the R3, or actually when it comes to the apartments in particular, the GC, it's 2 parking spaces per unit that's required.
No, the 2 people, the population group.
I think it was just an estimate.
Oh, yeah.
I think
Yeah, I
it was
mean,
estimated.
Realistically, do you think 2, that I'm just looking at the population group, do you think an average of 2 people per household
I
would be
think
there?
it sounds high
Yeah, I think it's something like that.
because of the
For
apartments.
apartments.
Yeah, we get a lot of single.
I think Chris just needed to estimate. So I don't think it was based on.
Yeah.
Anything scientific.
And just one other quick observation. I've thought about this before you said this. Like my wife and I spent a lot of time in Newcastle when I was in school. We stayed in Joe Turner's house on the 3rd floor. Shows you 144 East 3rd Street. And when I was in school, we loved living in Old Newcastle very much. And I was fortunate to be able to clerk for Judge Cooch when I graduated, which was really you know, just outstanding to be able to work with somebody like him. But we couldn't afford it. When I got out of school to live in Old Newcastle, we would have loved to. We looked around, and these opportunities like this, maybe not downtown, but close by, you know, does open up the market to some more folks. It makes it a little bit more affordable, certainly. So that is something that a project like this can offer to folks. who can still share in all the great activities in Old Newcastle, but maybe at a little bit more affordable price. And new construction.
I was just thinking back to the part two, though, if you're in retail spaces, you're gonna have to rely on outside people coming in.
Yes, and that's true. To get a really good tenant,
Right.
a credit-worthy tenant, you are going to need to pull some from the outside, and you're going to want to be on the front where the road is so people can see them, or they just won't rent.
Right.
That is true.
But I'm just saying.
For parking,
parking
yes,
spots,
yes.
yeah. So-
That's true.
So let's keep that balance.
Yeah.
Can I make one suggestion about where some parking could be moved? If nobody minds, would you move to the, like the drone simulated view?
Yeah,
Yeah, that one there.
okay.
So, right now, that's a parking lot with a strip of green down the middle. But, like, what if it wasn't? Like, what if it was like, this like, green space or, plaza, something, that wasn't just primarily about car storage? Like, if I had any, try to persuade people that not quite so much parking, that's the parking that I would want to see go first, because if that was not just a parking lot with a strip of green, was like a genuine like public space, landscaped and open, like those apartments along there would be just like, people would be just scrambling to live in them, because that's just what an amazing space that would be. If it wasn't just a parking lot with a strip of green.
So I am going to take a little bit of a push back a little bit about it being a parking lot. It's not a 60-foot wide head in on each side parking lot. It is designed as a one-way street with angled parking, which is actually a very traditional street type of design. A parking lot is 24-foot drive aisle, 2 head-in spaces on each side. And it certainly, in the hands of, I think, sort of a clumsier way of looking at it, that's what that could have been. But that's not what it is. Those are like one-way streets with angled parking and some parallels with a median. Could those parallels somehow come out and make that median wider? Sure, but I'm going to tell you that retail is not going to rent unless there's some of that head-in parking there.
I was talking about maybe the space sort of beyond the retail down to the river.
Down.
That was all
Going this way.
a green space where
Yeah.
if you lived there with kids and that was just a place with kids, you just sent the kids out. And it was just this amazing public space, not a place to store cars, but like landscaped and, all kinds of cool stuff going on. Like that would just be an amazing, think of it like what we have in Newcastle, the big open green.
Maybe move the retail parking to the side of Lucan's.
Well, so Lucan's is actually, we currently own Lucan's, but it ultimately gets turned over to the city. So they would have to, it is still an industrial park, so it kind of still needs to have its little bar width because of that, because of the truck traffic. It's a great idea. We just know that there's some things that are going to push back.
If I had to park out there, I wouldn't go to those retail shops.
You park on right.
You want to be.
I would want to be right
In there.
there.
But I mean, there's other things. Can we go back to that view? Because there's other things you can do to even mitigate that. I mean, we've all heard the term Warner, I assume, maybe not. Maybe not. Okay.
Yes, the Lunar is.
He likes to show up as University of Miami.
I've never heard of it.
Warner, it's a Dutch word, W-O-N-E-R.
Yeah.
It's for shared space. It means it's not a street, it's not a sidewalk, it's not a parking lot. It's all those things. So the curbs are generally flush, it's bollarded instead of curved, sometimes in a special paving. Maybe 90% of the time it is serving as parking, but you can close it off and it becomes a big plaza space. Some of those, the best spaces in the world that we all think about are all workers. And you can certainly look at maybe doing that central space, maybe with special paving, maybe that special space, maybe that space in the middle has the pervious pavers in it. That's the one place you can do it. And that whole thing, now the space is not a little space in the middle, even though that's the grass. It's from building base to building base is the actual space. So there's things that we can do that, and the framework is certainly set up for that kind of flexibility.
It's the center of this whole place. I mean, if you just I mean, it could be pretty amazing.
Could be, and it leads right to the water into the.
I think
clubhouse, the
if
restaurant.
I'm correct, so there's some like shopping centers up in Pennsylvania where you park on the perimeter of everything. And everything faces in and you walk through, it's like its own little mini town.
Yes, I know exactly what you're talking about for Route 1.
So maybe that's more of what you're talking out, so that you have all the activities and you have socialization space and you can get to all your retail shops. I don't know if, I guess, just based on where you're putting the retail, there's enough to, there's enough retail
I was
too
like to
that
say-
would accommodate that even.
Right, it's not meant to be a shopping center.
But I could see like closing it down like they do on Market Street for special events or something.
Exactly.
And, part of what Seth and our traffic engineer are gonna do is look at a parking demand analysis. And if we think we can peel some more off, then maybe that would be the spot to peel them off from, right? And put in more green.
Yep.
Certainly something that we.
So it might be helpful to them if they did, I mean, I don't know if this is what, I've never been to a planning commission before, I don't know how you guys roll.
Oh, well.
But like, if you wanted to give them some encouragement in this direction, then.
There's an opening on the board, right?
I mean, right now, what you're hearing from them is that they don't want to
Yeah, it's
variance
up to
more than
there.
22%, right? And you could tell them two things, like, you're already pushing the envelope with asking for a variance of 22% on the parking. Or you could try to give them some feedback, like, you could be more ambitious.
Okay, well, this is a concept plan, so all these are
Great idea.
helpful, right?
Yep.
Good idea.
I have one sort of concern about parking, which I'm sure somebody can answer, but it seems to me that there are, most households now, if there are two people, have two cars at least. And so 1.5 cars, I mean, what happens if there are more people in this development with cars than there is room to park them with 1.5?
Well,
There really isn't any place to go unless you go, I don't know.
a couple things, this development being that people. We certainly we don't want to promote excessive automobile ownership.
No, absolutely not. But obviously you've got to have it for people.
We do, we have to be market sensitive, to that, so there's a balance that we have to.
Yeah, and also, as somebody said, it would be, it's a big incentive, I would think, for you to try to get Delta to do some mass transit that's
Yep.
available, and
Good
then.
idea.
Can I explain if I like took a swing at your question? I sort of,
I'm
I'm
sorry.
thinking more about this parking thing. So there's sort of like two kind of big approaches, right? There's what is the planning commission and government and citizenry like us, what do we think they should build for parking? That's one way to think of this. Another way to think of it is like they want to rent and sell stuff and make a profit. They're developers. Like they're probably not gonna like do anything to keep people from moving there, because that would be self-defeating, right? They wouldn't work. Like so, like they have a motivation, right? Just as profit-making capitalists, not to have too little parking to sell and rent units, right? So like, I kind of feel like I'm willing to like let them build what they want with regard to parking. Let them decide.
And the land, which is their loss if they don't.
Yeah, if they build too little parking, then they're gonna have trouble getting people to live there. But like
Where you add on parking,
let them build what they want.
Reserve space.
reserves, yeah,
If it
reserves.
doesn't work, yeah.
Right.
I would just take the state even to the green space
Well,
area.
and actually, I wanted to, okay, again, for record, Mario came to me with the Cohen Parkway gravel. One of them, and Seth can speak to this because he knows I've literally been beating him over the head. We want this to look as green as possible. Because candidly, it's what's gonna sell the place. You go in there and you see green as opposed to black parking lot. That's what's gonna sell the place. That's why you're gonna wanna be there.
That center play, like if that
It's
was,
awesome.
if that lived, but if it. we
But if
could
it
do
was
better,
more, right,
like those units in particular on this side, like,
Right.
I'd like, See, I wasn't really like where I live. I'd like to live there. It's
Yeah.
pretty cool.
So thankfully, I mean, I'm gonna, because I can tell we're kind of getting to an end. I want to first say thank you, everybody who came tonight, obviously the commissioners, but also the public, because these ideas are fantastic. This is exactly what we're looking forward to, was to get this feedback, because I suspect we're gonna go back and tweak this some more, make it even, make it even better. I love the idea of only parking what we need to park.
Yeah.
Because I want more green. Nicholas is the guy who's gonna end up, benefiting from this with his family. He wants more green. Because we know from a luxury standpoint, you don't want to see parking lot. You don't want to see sidewalk, candidly. You want to see lush. You want to see, flowers and trees and grass. That's what you want to see. That's what sells. That's what we want.
I have one more question.
Yes,
Is there any concern about the proximity to Collins Park? It's either gentrification of that area possibly from this, or possibly any spillover from.
I have not thought of that. It's a great question. Mario, I don't know if you were.
I mean, I think the one way in, one way out sort of is a good thing, bad thing, right? It's hard to get into our facility unless you come in Lucas Drive, so we're already isolated. And with this landscaping that we talked about, we're sort of creating a more isolation. So I don't know that I have a good answer to your question on that, other than have we been worrying about it? I'm gonna say no. I look at it as, hey, we got a whole bunch of people over there whose house is gentrified, like you just said, saying, hey, I got another place I can go to that's newer and flashier, and it's not far from where I used to live. So I'm gonna look at it as a marketing opportunity.
I'm gonna piggyback on your isolation. Are these people gonna feel like they're part of Newcastle? I don't live in the historic area. I live in the development outside of it. The only real reason I feel part of it is because I have family within the district. My dad was a politician for the longest time in the area. I know a lot of people in the area, so I don't feel isolated because I can walk in there and see who are. But isolation that far out, I mean, they're not gonna necessarily feel a big part of, like they're part of our community.
No, I think that's possible. I think that's the first point. I think, annexation can bring that sometimes, when you have these areas sort of on the fringe of town, that I think can produce that result. But I think I would suggest that if, I would think one of the selling points, quite frankly, is the town and all the wonderful things you do all year long in town. And I suspect you'll have folks that would move here, in particular, the ones that are knowledgeable about all the great events that my wife and I love to still go to, that would make them part of the community, more center city, if you will, in Newcastle City scale, of course. My wife and I, like I said, we still go, and we live many miles away. So I think that could be a little bit of a challenge, but I think it's something that could be bridged.
So I got a couple answers to go with that. One is, and we've had these discussions, we're willing to set aside easements. We own more than just this particular property. We own further down, where maybe in the long run, Parkway Gravel works with Newcastle and we get grants, federal grants, where we can build a walkway from
Battery Park.
exactly, just continue on down into Newcastle and maybe ultimately connecting with the Riverwalk. So that is something we've talked about. The second thing is this whole idea of sense of community has been extremely important during this design process. Now, granted, it's isolated from Newcastle. However, one of the things we're doing, this is a simple thing, and it's going to sound silly. The mailboxes are all going to be in the clubhouse. And the reason why they're all be in the clubhouse is we want everybody to run into each other when they go get their mail, as opposed to literally being at their door. So we're trying to establish that sense of community within this facility.
I would hope you would have area there to promote all our.
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely. That'd be
Put all
easy.
our posters up and everything.
No, I think the clubhouse is, that's exactly what that's for.
right. And it also is proximity to the riverfront.
And there's a lot
Sure,
of people
sure.
that
The
use the
connection
trail.
trail,
We use the
absolutely.
bike trail. So you can bike through there and also walking path, bike path, that would definitely be a big plus. Because I know people are always trying to find different ways to get in.
There'd be mutual self-interest in the city and in
extending that trail.
That would be
We're on
wonderful.
board. I mean, that's,
Okay.
The crystal thing is, or somebody's affiliated with Bike Delaware. I get his emails.
Yes, he is.
I get his
I've
emails.
heard that rumor.
All right, well, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for all your time. One final housekeeping matter, if I may, Chairwoman. Some of you are probably looking at that site acreage at 168.7, and I said 179. When you go on parcel view, it's at 179. So I'm not sure if parcel view with the county is picking up the water. Some of the water is within the parcel lines, but we'll make sure we clarify that next time.
Sean, it may be the
It
parcel
might
we
be the
cut out.
fact that we, sliced off
Oh,
a little
right.
section.
I think that's
because
only
I-
5 acres. I think that's only
Yeah,
5 acres.
it's about 5 acres.
It's a 10-acre delta, so I think some of it's water, but we'll clarify that in case
A
some of you
parcel
are
which will
wondering.
be IOP.
Yes, I saw
Keep
that.
it easy again.
But thank you, everybody, for your time.
Right.
Just share this with you this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we're going to continue on with our agenda, so you're welcome to stay, leave, whatever.
I can get them.
Yeah.
Appreciate that.
Yep.
Ready? So, why am oh, I think we're on to special projects.
Actually, we skipped over number 3.
So, right, so number 3, I was just, I don't have an update from Chris. The annual report is actually due at the end of June, so assuming that we don't have anything big, I'll have Chris go over the report. Although I was gonna say, in going through the goals in the comp plan, some of the commissioners had expressed that they were interested in certain goals and, you know, so I can't remember who said what, but, you know, anytime if you want to get it on the agenda so that we talk more about that particular goal. All right, special projects. So since we don't have John, George, I'm gonna put you in charge. Is there any, no updates, sorry.
I see as far as the other level 3 charges.
All right. All right, and I think council voted,
As far as the placements of the other ones around.
Right, well, I think council has voted on the level 2 chargers and where they're gonna go.
I was watching part of the council meeting and put one where the recycling was, they were supposed to put one there at this point. I'm not sure.
I thought that was it. I thought they.
Aren't there more coming? I thought there were more coming. So,
I know they said they want more. It sounded like they were
yeah.
saying we
bring
need
it
more.
yeah. Maybe even a higher
That's what you said, the
No.
level 3.
level, yeah.
Yeah, there's a grant for the level 3 chargers that we're waiting to hear about. All right, transportation plan. I actually heard from Heather, Wilmapco today. And they have a rough draft that Wilmapco is reviewing and working with the consultant to make some edits, and she's hoping to get a cleaner copy that she can share soon. But I don't know what soon means. There will be. Oh, I don't know about a workshop, but at least with the advisory committee, they'll review the plan. I would think there would be a final workshop. Yeah, the city is doing a transportation plan, but they weren't really doing anything last year. Working more with intersections. James?
I was just wondering, I'm assuming, but those innovative ideas for the gateway intersection redesign is still in the.
Uh-huh. Yes,
We're excited.
yes, I know.
When is
I
she
know.
supposed to get that back to you?
Soon. And I'm hoping to get a cleaner copy I can share with the planning team soon, exclamation point.
So maybe you guys are interested in this is something we shared with Wilmco. So one of the questions was, how much of the vehicle traffic, like in central Newcastle, is just cut through, like, not starting or ending in the central district, but just people cutting through. And nobody, Delta didn't have any numbers, Macro didn't have any numbers, so we actually got those numbers. We went to this company that aggregates the cell phone stuff and got the data from them. For Delta to get that, I understand what it costs, like, is it $500,000 or several million? Like, it would have been a lot of money. We got it for considerable less because we're not Delta. And we gave them, we analyzed, how much of the vehicle traffic is cut. It's 50%. Half of the cars.
Is that through Sixth Street you're talking about? or-
Mostly through 60. You can see when you go out there, just people just, like, pop, you can see the cars, they stop at the stop sign, and they just zoom, they go right through town. Half of the car traffic.
Do you know what period of time that is? Like, is that for a year or?
Yeah. It's like the whole-
Because I do remember when Delta did their transportation study, I don't think October was an appropriate month to look at.
This was GPS.
At
so
all.
it's the whole-
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I said they looked at October. You're not looking at our summer traffic. You're not looking at the Christmas traffic on 273 going out of Amazon. It was inappropriate
My-
month to look at.
My neighbor, unfortunately, used to live on Sixth Street, and she said when she lived there, it was a nightmare. Like, there were times of the day where she couldn't have the window open, or just, all the exhaust fumes and all the noise.
That's why that Dutch left, I think, is a good idea. Making everybody,
Both the wash and sweep on the south side, sweeping people so they don't come into town, and then the Dutch left on the east side.
yeah,
So
it's a-
they're good. I think there are other good ideas in the plan, but those are the two things I think make a big difference in the quality of life.
yeah, for sure.
Have you shared your data?
With Wilmco.
Oh, you have, okay, good.
I don't think we shared with Dell. We shared, Wilmco is running this show, so
Right,
they shared with, I think. they shared
you're
it
on
with
the
some-
advisory,
Mhm.
okay. Good. All right, sea level rise task force, I'm on it. We've had 3 meetings. We've mostly been reviewing studies and reports. Currently researching some funding sources, so we're moving along, but no easy answers. The dikes need raising, and of course we have the gap in the historic district. and the flood, so, but working on it.
Thank you.
Anything else on the special project? All right, comments from commission members. I have 2. So with John Lafferty resigning, he was the commission's vice chair. And according to our code, the commission shall elect annually a chairperson and a vice chairperson from among its own number. This does not have to be approved by council or the mayor. We just elect. So I'm looking for someone to serve as vice chair till the end of the year to fulfill the rest of John's term. I have talked to Bree and she's interested. Are there is anyone else interested? Or any other nominations from within here, from us?
I think Bree would be good.
I agree,
Okay.
yeah, I was gonna nominate her.
Oh, all right.
Why?
Well,
Because she didn't show up. You get nominated.
no, I did
I'll come
talk
to every
her.
meeting.
I did talk to her.
No.
All right, well, let me make a formal motion. We have a quorum here, so we'll do this officially. I'll make a motion to elect Bree Rivera as vice chair to complete John Lafferty's 2022 term.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we have a vice chair. And then my second thing is the planning commission typically meets on the 4th Monday of every month. We can change the meeting date with notice. I just know with summer vacation, sometimes it gets to be a problem, and I thought if I shared the meeting dates and people who knew they were gonna be away, just so that we can have a chance of having a quorum. So I'll do that after the meeting. I already know I have some conflicts. All right, that's all I have. Comments?
I just really appreciate the presentation. That was great. It was good. And the feedback from the community as well. I think it's we, it'd be nice to have more of that. So it's,
I'm very interested to see all the reports that come back after.
yes, plus.
Yeah.
Great.
What would the council vote to?
All right, and we didn't lose all our public. Do we have any general public comments for the planning commission?
Yeah. Have a letter from Kilbreth. Good evening, commissioners and public. I feel that the proposed amendment to 2020 comprehensive plan and suggested land use change for properties located at 130 and 150 Lucas Drive, Newcastle, Delaware, 19720, tax parcels number 21-022.00-001 and 21-022.00-002 from limited industrial office park to residential and commercial should be turned down or at least tabled for the following reasons. I don't think that this project should go through the planning commission yet, as there has been no specified public workshops on this project yet. The developers have not done their due diligence to file and receive all of the following reports necessary to go ahead with this project. I especially don't think that the planning commission or the public will have enough information to decide on whether to go ahead with the project as presented, a scaled down version, or to not approve it at all. I feel strongly that since the comprehensive plan was completed and such a substantial project was not recommended to be included in the plan, the planning commission and council should not vote in favor of amending the plan to include a project even close to the size of a project as what's being proposed. If this project gets fast-tracked through the city boards and commissions, we the people will not have any control of what the project scale will be like by the time the city council pushes it through for approval. The only information that we as the public and the city has to go by right now are what the developer and his lawyer is saying. Plus, until we see all the proposed projects that are set to be built in our city limits and we get a handle on the river rise traffic, escape route solutions, bulkhead issues, wetland issues, and habitat encroachment issues, I feel that the city council should vote to put in place a moratorium on building projects. Thank you, Phil Brooks.
Well, I wish he could have been here tonight. And
Certainly.
there will be more public
Absolutely. I
meetings.
mean, we're at the very beginning of the process. Of the
Right.
proposed. And we've been as transparent can be. This is how you start the process. And this came up, there's always misunderstanding with these things sometimes. This came up at the introduction. That's how we start the process. There has to be a start to the process. And we're committed to working with neighbors. We waived the review times, deadlines. So we're not in any hurry. Happy to meet with this gentleman as well and bring our experts in. So I just want to reassure the board, we're not rushing anybody.
We do look forward to having you at future meetings when this comes up.
We will be here.
Did you have?
Yeah, Rob, no, I just want to make a couple other comments, general comments about the traffic. Let's see, where shall I begin? Ellen was talking before about 6th Street and a lot of the issues. I go out there every morning. Yeah, I mean, that's no secret. It is a big problem. I come out, always get Chestnut and Harmony mixed up. Which one? Chestnut, I'm coming out. Or where you're coming out onto 6th Street. It's a three-way stop. This morning, as in many mornings, I mean, I observe this every single morning. People blow right through that stop sign coming like from the Wilmington side, coming into town. When you look at right at them, they both. So the people that live on that street are not exaggerating. When they put the, well, it's not official yet, but when it looks like it's going to wind up this being a four-way stop there at 6 in Delaware. There was a hue and cry about how awful that was going to be, and I really didn't know. I had no idea what to expect. People were talking about dead bodies and blood in the streets, and oh, it's going to be on your hands. And I'm like, geez, this sounds like it's going to be awful. Well, apparently it's turned out to be anything but. And I live up on East 3rd, where I've complained so much that the chief has probably got sick of hearing me. But to his credit, he's got increased patrols out there now. But see, you're talking about the large percentage of the traffic coming through town, it cuts through. I could see that, immediately. And I never understood it. It's just a weird thing. I don't know what the advantage is, but people were doing it. Whatever their mindset is, I don't know. But they would cut through East Third because it's really the only one way to get out to Delaware in order to avoid the light at 6 in Delaware and to avoid 141. So they're resuming, but the chief doesn't believe in what I tell him 50. So let's say 40, all right? But they resume at 40, I think 45, maybe more on a 15-mile-an-hour street. Narrow as can be, cars parked on both sides. The most dangerous, crazy thing you've ever seen. And myself and a few of the neighbors over the last few years have gotten into it with some people because there's some people they object to you, tell them to slow down. Okay, well, and that's been bad. Everybody knows that that's been going on. It goes on, on 6th Street as well. But that seems to have stopped. But one good thing, I think that four-way stop has helped because people are now seeing, well, we're not gaining any advantage. So it helps us, I think, on my street. But, does that send more traffic to 36 rather? I don't know. Maybe so, maybe not. But still, they are cutting through. I know why they do it as well. One of the reasons anyway, they're trying to avoid 95. So I used to live in Jersey. I commuted over here every day. I would have been one of those cutters if I had had the brains to figure out what they were doing. I didn't understand it until I moved here because I have to wind up like that on Churchman's Road, a little bit past Harris Corner there. And I'm like, geez, I could have saved all this time. I wouldn't have been out on 95 with a cement wall on this side, 3 inches away, and a tractor, where they were putting that overpass thing in there. And it's still a mess, even though they're largely done. I guess it's still a mess. People are trying to avoid that. It's to our detriment. And one of the things that got me angry, maybe some of you that have been here a while know this, I still have never gotten a straight answer about it. But I was told by some people in town that seemed to know that, I don't know if it was 15, 20 years ago or more, that that supposedly, right, I'm not saying this was true, but supposedly DelDOT was on board with building some type of a Route 9 bypass. Maybe some of you know more about that than me. And that they said somebody in town, they didn't name it who it was, but they said somebody dropped the ball and it never went through. And that was the end of that. And now I don't even know where you put one, with all the, housing developments and whatnot. So it's a thing that you have to deal with here. Nobody's happy about it. But again, the chief has been saying this, and I can tell he's frustrated. You can just see it in him and you can hear it in his voice. The traffic situation in the town is 90% of what they deal with every day. And I don't know how you ever get used to it. You just kind of deal with it. And, again, that's my sole objection to this, particularly since I know that park a little bit and I'm back there every day. And I'm just thinking one way in and one way out and tractor trailers. And I'm just thinking, maybe it's a terrific place. I'm sure it will be. But if there's only one way in and one way out, there's just so many issues with the police that are overextended anyway, and okay, they have a presence in there. They have to, because it's city property, this little stretch of land anyway. I just want you to understand that I'm looking at this completely, not as far as soil erosion or anything. Again, I don't know anything about that stuff. So I trust everybody that knows about it to take care of it. I only know what I see. And every single day I'm down there and I'm looking at, 150 cars lined up at a traffic light with tractor trailers all around and people going this way and that. I'm just thinking this has potential for something really bad. Now it's going to be a big tax, gain for the city, but I mean, we're probably going to have to hire 2 or 3, maybe 4 additional policemen just to handle that. So there goes a lot of that tax. Okay, so I mean, I just wanted to kind of make that clear. I've tried to think this thing through, but I'm just learning about it these last, couple of weeks. And these are, to me, these are all the other stuff I know is important and you got to go by the book and work all those things out. But to me, this is the thing right in my face that I can't get past.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
I'll second. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.